Thank you. Good morning. All good? Okay. Maybe a stupid question in Italy. Who here drinks coffee? So, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word coffee?
Qual è la prima cosa che mi viene in mente quando bevi il caffè?
Feel free to shout a word. What do you think of? Smell? Yeah? Okay. Um, and a lot of people also, yeah, they think of the smell, they think of espresso, cappuccino, the beverage. And that's what most of the world has thought of historically of coffee. Coffee is a beverage. But what we are doing in Kaffe Bueno is changing the definition of coffee. What is coffee? Coffee is not a beverage. Coffee is a plant. And the beverage is only one thing that you can do with it. And I'm going to show you how. So my name is Alejandro. I'm one of the founders of Kaffe Bueno. It's a Danish bioscience company upcycling coffee byproducts into ingredients for personal care, but also nutraceuticals, food and beverage, animal nutrition, and different industries. So today I will tell you, or I will talk about how upcycling coffee can help the industry transition to natural, because that is, I don't know if this is happening. It's happening automatically. So, yeah, what does that upcycling coffee have to do anything to do with transitioning to natural in the industry, which is the main thing happening at the moment? So, first of all, what we do, we upcycle coffee byproducts using green chemistry, biotechnology, and nanotechnology to break it apart into all the compounds. I will tell you more about that later. Why we do it is because, first of all, as I said before, we want to change how the people perceive coffee. Instead of thinking of it as a beverage, to think of it as a resource. And in order, and how to do that, we will basically by unlocking coffee's health potential in different applications. A little bit of how we started. This is myself and my two co-founders. The three of us come from Colombia. This was about... Okay. You are using... Okay. So yeah, this was the three of us about 8 years ago. As you can see, starting a company takes away all of your hair. This is what is happening. But the three of us come from Colombia, and we grew up seeing coffee as a completely different thing. The three of us started in London, and about 10 years ago, when we were living in London, we realized how much waste there is after you consume coffee. Going to all these coffee shops, we saw all the coffee grounds being thrown away into the trash, and we started researching what happens to the coffee grounds. And we learned that they end up in landfills where they decompose and generate a lot of methane, which is very bad for the environment, a lot worse than CO2. And then we started thinking of our grandmothers in Colombia. In Colombia, when you're a little kid and you fall down and get a wound, your grandmother would put coffee grounds on the wound to help reduce inflammation. And I do this because when you're a kid, you don't believe your grandmother. But then we saw that it helped reduce inflammation, for example. And they also use it to dye their hair, the gray hairs. So when we were in London and we saw this coffee problem or this waste problem, we started thinking what is inside coffee that can help reduce inflammation on a wound. And that took us that in that process of learning what is inside coffee, we learned that first of all, coffee is much more than caffeine. Caffeine is only about 1 to 2% of coffee. And that relates to what people think of coffee, caffeine, or in the cosmetic industry, caffeine or scrubs. But that is nothing. What we learned is that coffee is composed of antioxidants, essential fatty acids, proteins, sugars, a lot of different health promoting compounds. But when you make a cup of coffee, less than 1% of those end up in your cup. The rest remain intact in the spent coffee grounds, which ironically, all of these health promoting compounds, when they decompose in a landfill or incinerated for energy production, they produce a lot of methane. So we studied a lot. We researched and we found more than 100 clinical studies showing that these compounds are associated with the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular diseases, neurological diseases, and also skin conditions. So we started looking into different applications of all of these compounds. And that took us, of course, to the personal care industry, but as well to the food industry, animal nutrition, and agriculture. All of the industries basically that are responsible for society's well-being and everyday products. And across all of these, we noticed that all of them are moving to natural because they have been historically driven by petrochemicals and synthetics. But in order, and then we started seeing all these big companies, L'Oreal, Beiersdorf, Unilever, all of them pledging to go natural by 2030. So we started thinking, why wait so long and not do it now? And we started learning that basically there's many problems with natural, as you all know. Usually they are a lot more expensive, or they have a batch-to-batch quality and reliability problem, and there is a performance issue as well versus petrochemicals and synthetics. So we found a way to use technology and coffee to bypass all of these problems and make natural upcycled ingredients that can serve as one-to-one replacements to petrochemicals and synthetics. But another interesting factor that I don't know if you have thought about, but in the personal care industry, everybody wants to move to natural. But then you talk to a formulator and they want everything to be white or transparent. And then I say, nature is not white, so how are you going to do that? So I'm saying this because in an evolving world, the industry needs to evolve with the world. So what was a standard 50 years ago doesn't necessarily have to be a barrier for the industry to continue evolving. So if the consumers today are more prone to accept a different standards, why is the industry so stubborn about whiteness? I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to leave it to you to think. And then this is our solution. What we came up with is basically a circular business model where we take coffee byproducts and then we process them in our biorefinery, break them apart into all these compounds, and then make ingredients. I'll take you through the timeline later, but basically in 2020 we launched our first couple of ingredients. In 2016 we started the company. 2020 we launched an oil and an exfoliant, which we have been selling for some years. And in 2023 we launched a lot of new actives. This is basically what we do with coffee. If we start here, or where the spent coffee grounds are, then we first use biosolvent extraction to take out the lipid fraction, which is the oil, and then we make different versions of this oil, serving as an active emollient. And then using the potassium salts of the fatty acids, we make a bio-based surfactant line. And then with the coffee grounds that are left after the oil is extracted, we use them as an exfoliant, but also as a food ingredient. But then, most interestingly, and this is where all the intellectual property is, with those defatted coffee grounds, we continue depolymerizing them, and then we separate the biopolymer fractions into, depending on their molecular weight, because each of them have different properties. So then they serve as different actives for different applications, basically. And then, like, there is, after each process, there are some products and there's a byproduct. And usually biorefineries in the world, they throw the byproduct away or they give it for burning or for fertilizers or whatever. What we do is that we use 100% of the biomass. So instead of throwing the residual fibers, then, which is basically a carbohydrate fraction, we continue depolymerizing that fraction into oligosaccharides and monosaccharides. This is a little bit of the history of the company. We started the company in 2016 in Denmark. In 2017, we got a grant by the Danish Innovation Fund to prove that we could extract oil from coffee and do all the tests in order to prove that it's good for skin. By 2019, we closed a partnership with the largest coffee company in the Nordics for the supply. We were also in a L'Oreal accelerator and some other things. In 2020, we raised 1.1 million euros by some private investors. We launched or we opened an R&D lab where we basically continue breaking apart coffee because by then it was only about the oil and the fiber. In there, then we developed all the downstream processes. And then we also launched an ingredient with Givaudan. And yeah, not important. And in 2021, Nivea launched a product line with our oil, as well as the Body Shop, and we got a grant by the European Commission for 2.5 million euros to build the world's first coffee biorefinery, which we inaugurated a week and a half ago. And yeah, now we are launching a lot of new ingredients. This is the world's first coffee biorefinery. We inaugurated it, as I said, a week and a half ago. This is some awards and press, and this is like a bragging slide, not relevant. And then some market traction. This is not an idea. This is a reality. We are selling in more than 20 countries to more than 20 brands, large and small. We have passed the quality, quality and compliance tests of Bayersdorf, so we're good. And then these are our commercial partners around the world. And now we get into our personal care portfolio. First, we start with Kaffe Oil. This is the active emollient I was talking about, or better known by our customers as the new argan oil. Maybe a little bit of context with that statement. When you think of transition into natural, probably your brain immediately goes to vegetable oils, which is, it's good, it's better than paraffinum and all of these ingredients. But then if you go deeper into it, then you realize not because it's natural, it's sustainable. Because the production of many ingredients, many vegetable oils, cause a lot of emissions, water usage, even slavery. And with argan oil, even though it's an excellent ingredient from an efficacy perspective, we have been seeing that its increased demand has resulted in deforestation in forests of Morocco, as well as not very good conditions for farmers. So that's why we started with Kaffe Oil. And basically it's the lipid fraction of coffee. It's rich in linoleic and palmitic acids, as well as diterpenesters, polyphenols, and tocopherols. And we have, at the moment, two different versions. The standard version, which is the orange-like, in real life it's more like brown, smells a lot like coffee, and you would use it in concentrations between 0.5 to 2% as an active ingredient. Some customers, usually smaller ones, go up to 10% because they really like the smell. But then for larger customers, they usually prefer less smell. So we developed a more refined version. a more refined version that you see on your left that has a lot less color and a lot less smell. But the composition in the TDS is exactly the same. And we have done a lot of tests to prove the efficacy as well. So I would say the Kaffe Oil, the standard version, is more, let's say, face applications, anti-aging, moisturizing, etc. Kaffe Oil, the refined, is more body care and hair. These are all the potential applications and even more. I mean, you can use it in any type of oil-based product or in any emulsion as you would use any other oil. And here is some of the efficacy, which you can get access to in a detailed way in the catalogs that URAI can share with you. But basically, we have done tests for antioxidant activity, which proves, the classic ROS scavenging activity, but also through the NRF2 pathway activation, we have seen that it can lead to anti-inflammatory benefits. And thanks to it accelerates the keratinocyte migration, which results in improving the skin barrier. And we have seen also in some customers in UK, some of the consumers have sent images of before and after, let's say in a wound or in post-acne scars, and it has helped heal them a lot faster. And then on the other hand,
preventing breakage and split ends. And this is from a sustainability perspective. We did 5 different LCAs, which we got the results about 2 weeks ago. And this is only one of the aspects, comparing the oil to other vegetable oils versus argan oil. It produces between 2 to 3.4 less emissions per kilo, and against palm oil, almost 10 times less emissions per kilo. Then we have fiber, which is the exfoliating agent that comes after the oil has been extracted. This, we don't have to talk a lot about it, it's a classic exfoliant. The only difference between using fiber and a normal, let's say normal coffee grounds that you would buy from a coffee roaster, is that we homogenize the particle size to 150 microns. So it's as fine as a flour. If you buy normal coffee, it's usually between 350 to 700 microns, sometimes even more. So it's very rough on the skin. It's not a lot more gentle. You can use it in, let's say you can play around more with the concentrations. If you want to do, for example, a face mask, you can use 0.5 to 2%. But then if you want to make a face scrub, 15%, or if you want to make a body scrub, 30%. This is all of the applications: body scrub, bar soap, cleanser, etc. This is one of the new ingredients, caffeine. The reason why it's called caffeine is because of its activity against advanced glycation end products. So it has an anti-glycation activity, but it's quite a multifunctional active biopolymer. It's amphiphilic, so water soluble and oil soluble, and it's particularly good for BB creams, foundations, concealers, mascara, things where you need some color. Basically, it is the molecule that provides coffee its color. We isolate that molecule, and the composition of that molecule or that compound is a chain of arabinogalactans with some hydroxycinnamic acids. So it's a water-soluble fiber that has a lot of antioxidant activity, has a lot of polyphenols. And because of this, then it has some good anti-glycation benefits and some SPF boosting capabilities. And then you can also help, or it can also help reduce the need for iron oxides, because you will buy yellow, red, black iron oxides in order to get to like a skin tone. But with this one, you can avoid all of that, or at least reduce the percentage of those. And these are the 4 different versions that we have. Basically, it's 2 versions, but then we have a powder and a dispersion version for each of them. One of them is very dark, almost black. You can see it later. And then another one is, we call it B because of it reminded us of bronze. So there you go. And then the applications for it: BB creams, foundations, concealers, etc. This is some of its efficacy. This is in vitro anti-glycation, proving that in very low concentrations you can prevent UV-induced glycation from happening at a cellular level. This is in vitro. We are getting the in vivo results very soon. We just got some preliminary results last week that it increases a BB cream formulated with caffeine, increases hydration about 16% in the long term. And we're doing more tests for fairness and elasticity. Then another one, Kaffe. This is also a new one that we just launched in the Arancio cosmetics. This is it's the same from a chemistry point of view as caffeine, but it's the lower molecular weight fraction. So it's targeted at scalp and hair. And we have seen that in vitro, it induces the expression of 3 growth factor genes that are associated with the prevention of hair loss and an increase of hair density and thickness. These are, of course, quite strong claims, so we need to do in vivo to prove that stronger. And on the other hand, we have seen strong metal chelating activity, so that translates in anti-pollution claims for hair. It uses the same shampoo. It can cleanse the hair from environmental pollutants like heavy metals.